Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a call to order for the Finance Committee. Today is, what's the date? March 8th, 2023. The time is now 6:32 p.m. In attendance is myself, Joseph Sokolovic, Chair of the Finance Committee. Committee member, Ms. Baptiste Perez online, and Mr. Albert Benahan, board member in person, and a bunch of staff on the screen.
Good evening, everyone.
The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes dated February 8th, 2023. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
Motion to approve the minutes.
I will second that. I find no material errors or omissions. And Ms. Baptiste Perez, do you find any problems with the minutes?
No.
In that case, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Next up is discussion and possible action on an enhanced audit scope and RFP. I wanted to bring this back for discussion to try to figure out what we're going to do with the RFP. I did speak to Mr. Pires a little bit between meetings and thinking about just issuing, trying to get a RFP issued for a standard audit according to government's accepted accounting principles and random sampling. And also maybe perhaps having them sit down with board members first to design where we would like additional samples taken or something like that. Mr. Pires, could you fill us in a little bit on?
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, we had some discussions regarding the approach that we would take in terms of contracting and bringing in an accounting firm that's experienced in this type of stuff. And I think the generality of it is key in order to allow the board and the superintendent and staff, whoever the board sees that needs to be involved in this, to give them the flexibility to focus in on what it is that you want to discover or take a look at in terms of the areas that you feel that need to be looked at. I think that the RFP should be designed in a general way where you retain the services of an accounting firm and with specific goals in mind that would be communicated by yourself, a member, or the superintendent, or whoever the designee is to speak with the accounting firm, so that they can focus on a specific area, as opposed to just say a general audit. We like Ms. Siegel has mentioned in the past, and I know Ms. Siegel is on the call, so she can maybe chime in a little bit. We get audited already by a number of certified public firms, and they do it according to the public standards. So I think that if we bring in another auditing firm, it needs to be specific as to what we ask them to do.
Yeah. So I'd like to intercede at this point, Mr. Sokolovic, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Pires. So we did have a discussion about the possibilities for moving forward. And I do want to emphasize at the outset, for everyone's edification once again, that the district undergoes 4 audits, not 1, but 4 every year by an independent audit firm. And those 4 audits are the annual financial review, which is the review of the annual financial statements.
I'll break you up. Can someone open the door?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I got it.
I think it's.
All right. The federal single audit, the state single audit, and the Connecticut Education Finance System audit, which is inclusive of the Special Education Excess Cost Grant. And we also have a multitude of reports and financial documents posted. With that said and understood, I did place in the portal through the superintendent's office a document that I can now share on the screen. So I hope that you had the opportunity to review it. It is on the screen at this time. And this is simply a two-page document which summarizes the basic proposed direction and content of a request for proposal. And basically, it states that the Board of Education would be seeking proposals for professional audit services from qualified independent audit firms of certified public accountants who could be available to conduct supplemental targeted audits, each with a specific limited focus, objective, and scope on an as-needed and as-requested basis, contingent upon Board of Education approval. It would be required that a supplemental targeted audit, if approved by the Board of Education, be conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, governmental accounting standards board, and agreed upon procedures consistent with professional independent audits. And in the last sentence, an audit of this type, if authorized, would be supplemental to the professional audits of the school district conducted annually by an independent audit firm. So with that said, and with the understanding that the district does undergo 4 major, comprehensive, in-depth audits each year, I do also want to emphasize that we may be the only district in Connecticut that posts the education finance system documents. And we post the budget plan, we post the allocation model, and we post the financial condition reports. And so I think that as we move forward, it should be understood that at present, I'm not aware of any reason to consider any type of supplemental audit at this time. But going forward, perhaps there would be a need at some point in the future for some type of supplemental audit. And if so, this RFP would provide the conduit to engage an audit firm through a standing contract. Now, the second paragraph indicates that it is the intent of the Board of Education to engage the selected firm when under contract on an as-needed and as-requested basis to perform one or more singular supplemental targeted audits, each with a predetermined focus, objective, and scope. The superintendent or superintendent's designee on behalf of the board would first request a quotation, which would mean a proposed agreement inclusive of the fee and timetable based on the contracted rate schedule prior to authorizing initiation of any service. The quotation and timetable would next be presented to the Board of Education for approval to conduct the audit. Of course, that means presented to the Finance Committee first. And if board approval is granted, then the superintendent and firm would sign the agreement, which will authorize the commencement of the audit. The final paragraph pertains to the term, which is standard language. So I'm just moving on now to the second page, which summarizes the services and deliverables, which would be incorporated into the RFP. And basically in part 2, it indicates that the firm would be expected to provide a series of services and deliverables. And we indicate perform the audit in accordance with the generally accepted standards and procedures, review financial transactions and records based on applicable procedures, laws, and regulations, perform testing and validation functions as deemed necessary to achieve the objectives of the audit, prior to completing a final written report, deliver and review a draft report and the proposed management letter with the superintendent, CFO, and Board of Education. And by the expected completion date, produce a written final audit report documenting the auditing practices and work conducted in relation to the audit objectives, conclusions, and recommendations. And the top section is basically standard language in every RFP, but I'll just move back to it for the purpose of completeness. The firm would, of course, be responsible for identifying adequate resources to staff and complete the tasks. And that would involve identifying a responsible staff member and all persons who will be responsible for completing the supplemental targeted audit. And in the RFP, they would be asked, as every proposer is for any RFP, to delineate a list of strengths and/or unique qualifications possessed by the firm that would benefit the Board of Education. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Ms. Baptiste Perez, any questions?
I suppose, I guess I wanted a random sample set for the audit. Being very too specific, the idea is to pick up something that may have been overlooked. I think from what I'm hearing, like to be, from what was discussed, for me, it just sounds too specific. Like I want you to go searching here for a particular item and conduct an audit on this content. That's my immediate feedback.
No, any audit, Ms. Baptiste Perez, is based on random sampling. By referring to a supplemental targeted audit with a specific focus and scope, we're simply indicating that the district undergoes 4 audits, including the comprehensive annual financial review each year. So if there was something specific, for example, if you wanted to audit all orders that involved contracts authorized by the board in a certain year for a specific purpose to determine whether the district processed those orders perhaps in accordance with board policy, that would be a targeted focus, and the scope would be the orders involving the contract. You might further specify that you want to look at orders involving contracts over a certain amount. But the firm is going to do a random sample. They're not going to look at every item. There could be 100 or more items. So they're going to do a random sampling in order to achieve the audit objective.
Oh, so, okay, I understand your example. So potential audit would be all contracts that were executed by previous superintendent that were not in compliance with board procedure.
Well, if you, I can assure you that in my department, we ensure using rigorous internal controls that that there is a strict compliance with rules, policies, and regulations. But if at a certain point in time there was a reason for auditing, as an example, all orders in a certain year involving contracts that were authorized by the board or contracts of a certain dollar amount, in order to determine whether there was full compliance with board policy and or a set of rules and regulations, that could be the focus of the audit. All right. The objective would be to determine to what extent there was compliance, and to identify any items which were not in compliance, and to offer recommendations going forward so that all items would be in compliance in the future. And the scope would be the particular year or period of time.
Ms. Siegel, would it include like the timeliness of items like contracts being brought before the board to be part of it, or no, it's just, it was in compliance, like, it was brought to the board approval, but it ignores the fact that maybe it was brought to the board late?
That could certainly be one of the audit objectives. It would involve research to determine, obviously, the date on which the item was brought to the board, and the date on which the services began, contrasted with the date of initiation in the contract. Technically, we shouldn't be providing any services until a contract is signed, and not until the start date specified in the contract.
Thank you.
Mr. Bennett.
No questions, moment, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I got something, and again, I would like to begin by saying this is no reflection on the integrity of the accounting office. I have full confidence in the professionalism of the office. This is more of a intent to build up goodwill as we go into the fiscal cliff and as we ask for amounts of money we've never asked before. As you know, Ms. Siegel, every time we go before the city council and other governmental institutions, they say, we don't know where you're spending the money. We get people coming up to the microphone saying, this money was wasted here, this money was wasted there. And we get accusations of staff spending willy-nilly, which are false. But I think it'll go a long way to creating some actual goodwill, which is an intangible asset when we're going forward, asking for more money. We're looking at a fiscal cliff coming up on a magnitude we've never seen before. So I think it'll be great for us to be just stamp of approval. Done a wonderful job. Now the community has more trust and faith in the numbers, and they'll be more likely to invest in it and less likely to accept basically misinformation being decimated by people who don't want to fund us. And that being said, I do have one suggestion to insert into this RFP. If we go to paragraph, where's the paragraph? Second, paragraph 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, line 4, after the word scope, a sentence stating such objective and scope will be determined after consultation with the 9 board members as far as the objectives and the scope. Because I don't want anybody saying that we left it on the person being audited or the group being audited to select such things, because it's supposedly check and balance to leave the people to believe our books.
Mr. Calvin, could you please repeat that sentence?
Yes. Okay, give me a second to regroup. Hold on. So, such objective and scope shall be determined by the 9 members of the Bridgeport Board of Education. And I know the words are clunking. Maybe somebody can help me out with them. Basically, the intent is to get them to sit down with us separately and then design an audit based on the conversations they have with us. So if somebody could put that into proper wording, I'd appreciate it.
I'm sorry, such objective and scope shall be determined by the 9 members of the board, and I'm missing the second half. Are you indicating by the board with whom?
And with the board, with the auditing firm, and they'll design the audit around the board's desires.
Understood.
Does everybody agree that's a good way to phrase that? The intent is to, like, the firm came in, I don't know if you got interviewed by the firm that did our RFP on special education. They talked to us and they got input from everybody, and that helped guide them, which which way to go. So the same would probably hold true for the oiling firm. If you have people telling you they got suspicions and the contracts that happened during COVID, when we weren't, when there was a moratorium on some of the processes and procedures. And you would say, you would want some focus there, and perhaps I would say, I want to look at a contracts that were brought to us in the middle. Mr. Benahan would want the parent budget audited or something like that. And then they could design their sampling around those areas, and it'd be targeted towards those areas. And I like the idea of a targeted audit. So long as we're selecting the targets, because it could be moving targets. It's very and it won't be redundant. I do like that idea of targeted audits rather than reinventing the whole wheel and going through a whole expensive audit of things that have been audited by the same city books. But this is definitely an enhancement above and beyond what the city does on their books.
Yes, I would just like to add in relation to the example that you gave, for example, the parent involvement budget allocated to the schools. When you construct a supplemental targeted audit, you have to be able to ask specific questions which define the parameters for the focus, objective, and scope. So the question might be, did the schools spend their funds, or to what extent did they expend their funds on activities for one-time activities for parents? To what extent did they expend funds, on durable types of supplies or consumable types of supplies? And were those expenditures, in accordance with the guidelines distributed for the parent involvement budget? So there has to be a specific question or a series of questions that can be answered by an audit firm of accountants whose job it is to review financial transactions.
Right, I absolutely understood. Ms. Betsy Spurs.
Point of privilege, can you zoom into what you're typing on the document? I can't see it from this.
Yes,
if
is
it's getting
that large
changed
enough?
more, I may need to see an eye doctor. Thank you. I do have a question. Such objective and scope shall be determined by the 9 members of the Board of Education. Do we need to have the 9 members of the Board of Education there?
You're correct.
Right now we're at 8.
Can you strike the 9 and just leave members of the Board of Education? Or maybe Ed Current.
Or what about majority?
No, the majority would have to vote. No, they're going to sit down with us. If there's 5 of us, we could have 5 different audit areas, or we could have some that's overlapping and they have 7 or 4 or whatever, depending upon how much. The more audit areas we have, the more expensive the audit will be. So we got to keep that in mind and not look at areas of frivolity, if that's even a word.
Don't think so.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying about the scope and targeted questions, like for instance, the content. I'm not mentioning things that actually were going to be suggested, just random utterances right now. So if we go to the contracts that were filed during COVID, we would ask something like, look at every contract over $25,000. Ensure that money was, I just had it in my head. Make sure the goods were delivered and used, and what's on hand currently from the leftovers or whatever have you like that. I know the wording's not proper right now, but it will be refined as we go. And, or, for instance, Mr. Bennett, not Mr. Bennett, I'm just assuming Mr. Benahan with the family engagement dollars, but that could be anybody picking family engagement dollars. Say we could want to look at, we want to target 2 schools and make sure all the money was spent, all the P10s were submitted and everybody, whether sent through the computer or sent hand, that they all match up with what the PAC president recalls and what have you, and any discrepancy be pointed out. It's like I like it as is. I think we got a good document here. Yourself, Ms. Perez? Baptiste Perez, I'm sorry.
I think it's fine. The language added.
So do we want to put this towards the full board for approval?
Well, we'll have to develop the formal RFP now based on these goals and objectives. I think that's the next step.
Thank you, Mr. Pyrus, for pointing that out. So do we have a motion to ask Mr. Pyrus to create the RFP?
Mo-
And then- Yeah. Okay.
Motion for the creation of a RFP for an enhanced audit services based on the content discussed today.
And I'll second. Any further discussion? All in
May
favor?
I apologize for interceding,
No
but
worries. Go ahead,
may I
Ms.
just suggest that the motion be phrased as supplemental targeted audits rather than enhanced audits for your consideration?
So
I withdraw my second, withdraw your motion and make it again.
that's the lazy way to
No,
divide.
you gotta withdraw, no, that's, you
Yeah,
just
fine.
withdraw your motion, it's easier.
I withdraw my motion.
I withdraw my second.
What's the terminology again, Ms. Siegel?
Supplemental targeted audits.
Motion for the approval for an RFP for supplemental targeted audits based on the content discussed today.
I shall second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we've got some time. Okay, thank you, Mr. Pires. One more item on the agenda is, I think Mr. Pires, discussion and possible action on engaging a lobbyist to advocate for Bridgeport Public Schools in Hartford. Now, this is something that in my opinion is sorely needed. I don't know about the rest of the board, but in my 5.5 years on the board, I have never had a bill brought before the board to ask us, is this a good idea? Should we do this? Or what do you think? What kind of bills do you think we should create? I've had bills brought to me after they were written. I've had bad bills bring me pre-written testimony supposedly to support them. And I feel like people up in Hartford representing the city of Bridgeport are legislating at us and not for us. We don't get timely notifications of public testimony and bill tracking, and we have none of that. I believe it would be another very good investment to seek a lobbyist and or legislative aid, however it's phrased, to track the bills for us to maybe help us create some targeted bills and language that we could advocate for, not only through our own legislators, but maybe other legislators up in the state to help us out when we need it. Thoughts? Yes, Ms. Baptiste Perez.
I think the board does need advance notice regarding potential acts that are being brought up from Hartford that will impact the funding source for our schools, the content, and just overall assistance, especially when it comes in terms of timeline. I know there's other organizations that exist that do that, and it may not have a direct agenda aligned at times, or what people may perceive as not a aligned objective. And it gives those organizations, and sometimes it appears as other school districts, a superior advantage when it comes to lobbying for additional funds and dollars for schools, and for their particular institution. I think it's beneficial. However, it will work out in this situation just because we need more parents to be involved and their voices to be heard. We need more board member engagement when it comes to advocating for funding in schools, in Bridgeport Public Schools in particular. Yeah, I think it's necessary. How it's going to be done with some of the information that's provided in our packet, curious to see. But that's all the comments I have for now.
Mr. Benahan. Yeah, get another Mr. Benahan waiting first, and then you could take it.
No, go ahead, get to Ms. Siegel. No.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Siegel.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that you have all relevant information before making a decision. First of all, I'd like to say I certainly agree with the concept that lobbying is critical to the success of the school district in securing fair and equitable funding. I did include, however, an email communication in your portal from Constant Vickers, who is the City Director of Legislative Affairs. And when I read this topic on the agenda, I wrote to Ken Flato and just asked him if the city has a lobbying firm and how the city conducts lobbying, because I thought that information would be helpful. And the response indicates that Constant Vickers, who actually responded herself in this email communication, is the Director of Legislative Affairs. She's indicating that she's believes that other large cities such as New Haven and Hartford work with the city's Director of Legislative Affairs, as well as an outside lobbyist or lobbying firm. Now, according to Ken Flato, the city also has a lobbying firm under contract, and that is Reynolds Associates. I'm not sure as of today whether they use the lobbying firm on a fee basis based on individual assignments, or whether they have the firm under retainer on an annual basis. I can certainly inquire if you would like that information. But I think it's important to utilize the resources that are available first, before considering expenditures of funds for additional services that could represent duplication. In other words, the services that are available through the city may not currently be utilized by the board to the greatest possible extent, and perhaps we need to access those services and utilize those services to attempt to meet objectives. And if those particular services, the Director of Legislative Affairs and the lobbying firm, don't have the capacity to meet our objectives, then at that point you may want to consider alternative means.
Okay, you use it. You use the word objectives, and that word has a synonym that's very relevant right here. Can the city lobbyist be objective enough when we want to lobby the city for more money? Can they be objective enough to lobby for us when the interest of the Board of Education differs from the interest of the city of Bridgeport and where they want to spend money and pushing these types of legislation? Can you assure me that the city and the city legislator and our legislative aid over the past 30-odd years or however long have done an effective job for the Bridgeport Public Schools?
Well, I'm certainly not in a position to attest to the success or lack thereof on the part of the city lobbying group. I have not been directly involved. That has always been a function that was coordinated through superintendent's office and the board. Ms. Vickers did indicate that she has written testimony for both Superintendent Perrin and Board of Ed Chair Bobby Brown. She indicated that she worked with the former superintendent on legislation and funding. She further stated that she organized multiple meetings with the former superintendent, legislators, and other stakeholders, as well as wrote testimony for him on multiple occasions.
Right, and that's part of the problem, because some of the last testimony that was written had to be balled up and thrown in the garbage can and rewritten because it went exactly against the interests of the Bridgeport Board of Education, which is why I don't believe we should be using the city legislators. I have no faith in them. They may think in their writings that it's a waste of taxpayer money, but I think it's a very good, because if the city's not going to fund us, stay out of our way while we're legislating in Hartford. Ms. Pepsi's first.
Do you know the specific name of the lobbying? It just says Reynolds and Associates, Reynolds Associates. And I did a background check just off of that name, and it's forfeited, or another business that is under the Secretary of State is dissolved, and the only other one is dissolved as well. So if I wanted to look up who our lobbying group is, everything I've seen from the Connecticut website says that entity does not exist. So and I may not wholeheartedly agree with what Mr. Sokolovich said, but that coupled with the fact that Reynolds Associate right now does not exist, from my search on the Secretary of State website, troubles me with who is lobbying for us, because we have a lobbying group that does not exist. or what's the name of the lobbying group? If other cities work hand in hand, yeah, we maybe that is the logical and reasonable route to do as a board. But I know Constance exists, but this lobbying association, I've never heard of them a day in my life, and I think that's troubling. So I would need additional information.
Right, and if we do choose to go this route, we don't necessarily have to use a lobbying firm. We could hire our own legislative affair directors for the Bridgeport Board of Education, like we hire our own attorney. Now, the city may weigh in and they may not like it, but these are our dollars not our dollars, just dollars to use for the best purposes of Bridgeport Public Schools. And this is something I believe will pay for itself in probably one legislative session. And then we got to decide whether we want to hire a person or a firm or what have you to carry out these objectives. Mr. Bonan, do you have anything?
No, not at this moment.
I think that we need clarification with Reynolds Associates, but I do think that a meeting maybe with Ms. Vickers to discuss, I see the conflict in what you're saying is that we're trying to get money and assistance from the city. We're not getting it. There's a disconnect with what's being lobbied in Hartford. So therefore, we should have something else, like we have a separate attorney for the board.
So do you think we should ask Ms. Vickers to attend the next meeting to give us some more information?
Yeah, I think we should have a meeting with Ms. Vickers to get additional information. We need clarification from the city of this Reynolds and Associates. At least it's not the full name or the correct name. Because I just copied and pasted it in the search. And we should also vet Reynolds and Associates out. And after a determination of that step, like at least see what we do have. Because that communication hasn't happened. And if it still doesn't work out, then we probably need to move forward. It's just, we are in a dire, and it sounds like a broken record, we're in a dire fiscal situation, but we are. And it will blindside most people, but last year, I remember the ask was 8.6, and now what we're asking for again, Ms. Siegel?
Well,
For next year, 26.5.
26.5, so that's about 3 times more than previously. So I also agree that it may be worth the investment in itself.
I personally think it's definitely worth the investment to add additional, because last year, all our state delegation brought back from the state was $15,000.
I know.
$15,000, and this year, the bills that are being floated are bringing us $10 million less than our similarly sized districts. And that doesn't seem effective to me.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we were to get a lobbyist, like a person or outside firm, would we be able to kind of have them track the Bridgeport delegation attendance at the vote and at the meetings, and would actually have that information presented to us clearly? Because I've heard rumors that the Bridgeport delegation does not show up, and that's why we truly don't have a voice in Hartford.
Yeah, I think they could track our people, they could track bills, they could advise us on bills, they could even
I think the most important thing is that they would keep track of the dates of the bills and the types of bills that are coming up, so that we're at least notified and we know whether or not there's the level of importance that it would have for that particular lobbyist to be paying attention to those types of bills. And they would understand what's included in those bills, the finer details of the bill. Sometimes we'll just get a bill name and a title, and we assume that there's stuff in there that, we don't even know what's in there. So an analyst would understand the details of each bill and would be able to, lobby with legislators to get that accomplished.
Right. Yeah, and that's, if I lost my train of thought. Anything?
No, like I said, I think it's worth it. I think it's necessary. I don't want to fearmonger the kind of cuts that we will have to do given this fiscal cliff. But a part of me really wants to, because I think that's the only way we're going to get people to turn out, is to know what is truly at stake. Because there is no, I don't agree with the term, but there's no low-hanging fruit to cut anymore.
It's just there.
But I think having an analyst do that on behalf of the board would be extremely helpful. Instead of, there's been times where it just feels like it's scrambling at the last minute. And if we don't get our links to speak, we've missed that opportunity. If we didn't get to submit our testimony in time, we've missed that opportunity. And I've actually think we need something in-house to do that for us. There's been wonderful external organizations that have helped me, but this is a 9-member board, and all 9 members need to be kept abreast Because we need to be unified in our interest for the Bridgeport Public School District.
Yeah, and I remember what I was gonna say. I was gonna say they could not only lobby for the bills and track everything, they could also, if we come up with an idea that we want pushed in Hartford, they could help us probably create a bill and find a friendly legislator if they're not in our own backyard to push that bill forward as well. So there's all sorts of value that can be found, and not only in Hartford, they could advocate to the city for us, and maybe even on a federal level, just depending on how we direct them and how we do. So let's just we could bat this around. We still got to flesh out some things with the city. We want to hear some more information. We could bring this back. It's not an emergency. We haven't had a lobbyist ever, so we can take a little bit of time with this and just get some more information. So how about we table or postpone the rest of this discussion until the next meeting and ask the city legislative affairs director to speak before us to see exactly what they do and see if any services we're seeking will be duplicative. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll postpone. Mr. Benahan got something to say.
Yeah, I'm just listening to you and I don't have no question until you guys finish, but I know I would say this, and Ms. Siegel, you know more about this. All these people up in Hartford that they run, they're elected, we vote for them to be sure they are leaders in Hartford. I really don't understand how come they know that we need the money. They know we need to help our students. They know we don't want to give layoff to our staff, because the first thing they say, oh, board education, they're giving, layoff, but they don't know exactly, we don't have no choice, because you, Ms. Siegel, you're exactly more clear. You cannot do and present and let them know where the money go, because, they always say, oh, board education, they don't know how to use the money. Board education, I don't know what they do with the money, but you exactly, Ms. Siegel, you present them, you show them to the whole community and everyone the reason of why we use the money. So I'm always say, and I always ask, why these people in Hartford, they know what we need. It's, penny by penny is for our kids. If they don't fund us the way it's supposed to be. Why the reason Bridgeport is not funded the way it's supposed to be when we now have another city, they funded with no problems, with no questions, no comments, no buts, nothing. Oh yeah, you got it, here you go. But always when it's Bridgeport, it's always a but. Why this, he, she, no, when, how? I really do not understand, because you, Ms. Siegel, and everybody, and us as board members, we speak very clear. We let them know what we need. It's the present, the future for our kids, and our staff, they do amazing job. It's not easy. Sometimes I see by all eyes, staff, they come from his own pocket to, buy stuff and things they need for the school. So I really don't know what to say. I know Ms. Siegel and everyone trying to give this message. I don't know what's the next step. I really don't know. So I don't know, Ms. Siegel, you present everything very clear. I don't know why they don't see your presentation, or they never ask you what else they need, Ms. Siegel?
Well, we presented at the legislative breakfast organized by the superintendent several weeks ago. I think it's critical that the legislative group in Albany, in Hartford, advocate on behalf of Bridgeport, and so as has been stated during this session and other sessions, this group in the past has not effectively advocated for Bridgeport, as demonstrated by the outcomes in legislation. And so going forward, I think it's critical to continue to maintain a liaison with those with our legislative group, and to encourage them to present strong advocacy on behalf of the city and the board.
Yeah, I agree, but it's very easy to say by mouth from the governor, mayor, state rep, senator. All these people say, oh, we care about Bridgeport School. We care about education for our students. We care about this. We care about that. Okay, you care, but show the fact. You know, give it to us what we need. That's the only thing we ask.
Yeah.
No more comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Let the record reflect Ms. Brown is here. Ms. Brown, have you been here long enough to give some input on this subject?
I have not. I was listening to the Ms. Siegel talk about the advocacy. I will agree with what she's saying. I don't recall the entire conversation, but I am here. I'm driving, so please forgive me if I have to mute myself, but I'm here to, listen in.
No worries. We're going to be bringing this back on the next agenda. We're going to hear from the legislative director from Bridgeport and see what they're doing for us to make sure we don't duplicate any services they're giving us.
And to see if the lobbying group exists.
And we're going to check to see if the lobbying group exists that's in our packet that they sent to us, because a cursory examination, they could not be found and they were shut down and out of business.
Forfeited and resolved.
So hearing, so we're going to get some more information at the next meeting. There's no real time pressure right now. We haven't had a lobbying firm or lobbyist in forever, so we could take a little time with this and move forward.
I've just received an email from one of our staff members who is on the call, Patricia St. Louis. The name of the group may be Reynolds Strategy Group.
Look it up now.
No, we'll get till next week. We still got the presentation.
Just wanted to
Thank
make
you.
sure you were aware of that.
Yes,
I have not researched it myself, so we just received that information.
No, we don't. All right, so yeah, we'll just bring this back at the next meeting. We'll have further discussions and see where we want to go from there. So I think if anybody else got any questions on this agenda item, hearing none, we can move forward. Next item up is thank you, Mr. Pires. Next item up is the 22-23 budget update.
Yes, thank you. Before I begin, I just want to introduce the members of the finance team on the call. I mentioned Patricia St. Louis, who's the manager of budget and financial reporting, budget and financial reporting. And Nadira Clark is director of grants development and management. And Keoma Steele is the director of food and nutrition services. I'm going to put on the screen my notes so that it will be easy for you to follow along. Right. So I'd like to just give a brief report on the status as of March 2023. The February 28th financial condition report for the period ending February 28th was posted on March 1st. Our projections continue to indicate that approximately $9 million would be withdrawn from the savings on deposit in the internal service fund in order to balance the operating budget at the end of year close. As I've indicated in prior meetings, this amount may increase further or decline in alignment with the fiscal forecast for the operating budget. At this time of year, we still have to maintain reserves in various categories to account for potential upward trends at any time. I'd like to remind you about the savings that are on deposit in the internal service fund. For the Board of Education, as of the end of year close for 2021-22, the grand total was $27.7 million. Now, that is the grand total. If we do have to withdraw 9 million, then that would leave a balance of $18.7 million. And in fact, we've already withdrawn 3 million in order to help us to maintain budgetary balance as we move through the remaining months of the year. Also, at the end of the 22-23 fiscal year, the internal service fund should increase by approximately another $1 million, because we will once again contribute to the fund funds from the food and nutrition service budget to account for the health insurance costs of retirees from food and nutrition services. So we do this every year, subject to available funding in the budget. As I have indicated in prior years, the funds we contribute then belong to the Board of Education, because at the start of every year, there is a consolidated contribution from our operating budget into the internal service fund to pay for the health insurance for retirees. And we're basically paying up front for all of our retirees, including food and nutrition services. So at the end of the year, food and nutrition services, in effect, reimburses the board. Right? So hypothetically, if the final number is 9, then we would have a balance of 18.7 plus 1, which would be 19.7. Now, for food and nutrition services, you'll recall that we had a net balance of about $5 million, from which we deducted 2 million and transferred that 2 million into the food and nutrition budget in the current year in order to make a major, capital contribution to replace outmoded equipment in the nutrition center and outmoded equipment in the school cafeterias. And so currently we have a balance of about 3.1 million on reserve in the ISF, restricted to food and nutrition services only. And as I indicated when I gave the end of year report, this restriction will be strictly enforced in order to comply with regulations governing the use of federal and state nutrition funds. Now, I also want to take a few moments at this time of year in March to just reiterate some of the key factors that we're confronting in the current year. And the first is Alliance ECS, that our increase was only 15,434. This, of course, relates to our prior discussion about advocacy at the state level. It wasn't 1.5 to 2 million as in prior years. So we began at a lower initial resource level than in prior years to cover escalated costs, and we're filling the gap with resources in other fund sources. Also, our average teacher salary has increased beyond turnover savings due to the employment of many experienced teachers to fill vacancies, and our cross-certification programs, which are very important programs and certainly needed and very valuable. And these programs involve putting teachers on the salary table with 2 additional steps. And so if you'd like to know the current average, I checked this morning, and based on the last payroll, it was 75,873, and that's for 1,514.7 teachers on the payroll with salaries. We have other teachers on the payroll who are pending certification. They're earning a per diem rate, so they're not included in this number. And of course, we have vacancies. Transportation. Our costs have increased by 6.72% in year one of the new 5-year agreement with We Transport. Special education. While out-of-district placements have declined, and that is certainly a positive development, and we're very pleased to see the decline. Hopefully that trend will hold. However, the district's share of an out-of-district placement has increased. So our share, as a reminder, is 4.5 times the NCEP plus the cap times the balance. So in that equation, we have a higher NCEP due to the infusion of the ESSER grants, which is $18,757. And the cap for this year is 23.75%. So we were disappointed to see the cap go up to that extent from 18.02 in the prior year. Nevertheless, that is the number. And so our share of a placement has increased. And concurrently, there are costs in other special ed sectors that have risen. For example, one-to-one paras. I think it is a positive development that when we take into account the growth in certain areas and the savings in other areas, such as the out-of-district placements, I believe at this time there is a net gain, which is important and hopefully will remain stable. But it's too soon to know whether or not that trend will continue. We're remaining hopeful that it will. And also, I spoke previously about the Fairchild Wheeler campus, which is our interdistrict magnet high school. We have 3 high schools at the campus. They have suffered revenue loss in every year for the last few consecutive years. So total enrollment has declined again, as I mentioned earlier this year, in 22-23, and the impact of the revenue, the impact of the enrollment reduction in the current year was approximately a loss of $300,000, which reflects the state magnet grant plus the loss in magnet tuition. However, the deficit in the magnet grant is much higher. The deficit in the magnet grant is about 1.7 million. Last year it was $1 million. So it increased in the current year to 1.7 million, which takes into account the loss of revenue plus the escalated costs. Now, both Biotech High School and Aerospace High School have not met the residency standard of 25% in the current year. We are pleased to report that the State Education Department will not, in the current year, impose a financial penalty on these schools due to failure to meet the residency standard. However, going forward, looking ahead to 23-24, we do not believe that the state will continue this waiver. We fully expect that in 23-24, the state will reimpose the financial penalty. So it's going to be critical that enrollment grow and that these 3 schools meet the residency standard, which basically means at least 25% suburban students. Also, in pre-kindergarten, I had discussed with you previously that the excess cost of the state grants for pre-kindergarten is funded in Title I, and we schedule close to $1 million for that excess cost. In the fall term, there was a high number of open seats, which was resulting in what I've described as an amplified charge for excess cost, much higher than we had anticipated. However, I'm very pleased to report that due to the vigorous efforts of the Chief Academic Officer, the academic team, and our schools, the number of open seats has declined substantially. So currently, in the month of March, this morning's report indicated only 15 open seats. Now, we are striving for 0 open seats, obviously, because we know there are many children who need this service, and we want to ensure that they're offered that service, and we'd like to have 0 seats. But we lose for every open seat, for every seat that remains open in a classroom for the entire month, we lose $600 per seat per month. So I'm pleased to report that positive development. And finally, we continue to leverage our grant resources. We're continuing to utilize the ESSER funds for services that arose from the pandemic, and that includes technology, curriculum renewal, and L and SPED services. It's also important to understand that we're leveraging those resources not only on an annual basis, but also with a long-term view on a long-term basis, which means, for example, in the area of technology, our Director of Technology Services, in constructing the technology plan, has built in multiple services that involve multi-year agreements. So we're trying to leverage the ESSER grants so that when the funding ends in 2024, we can still reap some of the benefits going forward. We won't be able to retain the staff who are funded in the grants. We won't be able to retain those positions. Staff, of course, will be absorbed into vacancies through attrition. And just as a reminder, we are funding 4 kindergarten ASD classes, special ed classes, in the ESSER IDEA grant, which is separate from the main ESSER grants. We have 8 resource teachers in the main ESSER grant. We have 6 ESL teachers in the main ESSER grant, as well as contracted psychology, speech, and nursing services, and transportation to the expanded sites in the special ed extended school year program, ESY. Right, and finally, I just wanted to share this chart, which indicates the summary data for the ESSER 2 grant and the ARP ESSER grant. ESSER 2 is ending in 23. ARP ESSER is ending in 24. Next year is the 3rd year of the funding cycle. So we are getting ready for next year to be a transition year, leading to the end of ESSER funding. Now, ESSER 2, which ends in 23, started at 44.6 million. And at the start of this fiscal year, in July of 22, the balance was 21 million. And we are on track to fully expend that amount by September 30th of 23. And ARP ESSER, which ends in 24, started at approximately $100 million and had a balance as of July 1 of 22 of approximately $80 million. And this dollar amount will be expended over 2 years, 22-23 and 23-24. And we are, again, on track to fully expend the funds by 2024. Thank you.
Ms. Betsy-Flores, any questions?
No.
Ms. Brown? Any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Benahan?
Yes, Ms. Siegel, you said in the beginning, you're talking about the magnet school was 1 million, they went up 1.7. Can you explain me a little bit that part, why the reason went up? If you mind, please.
Yes, they did not go up, Mr. Menahan. I said the deficit in the interdistrict magnet grant is a negative, meaning a deficit, $1.7 million.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. It's because I'm gonna look like me, Christina. I need glasses. It's because it's too small for us to see it, and it's not, and all this information is not in a package. That's why I asked question.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
She's in the right spot. Yes, I will follow up on what Mr. Benahan said. When we're looking at, you said it's a biotech and aerospace are not in compliance with 25%. Now, is the 25% encompassing the whole school or is it grade by grade?
It's school by school, each school individually.
School by school. And
All grades combined.
Right, so do we know how far out of compliance, how far away from the 25% we are at?
We do have that data. I don't have it immediately available. Nadira, do you have it?
No, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah,
I
I'm
can
sure I have it
pull
on
it up.
file. I can take
Yeah.
time to look for it if you'd like to know this evening.
No, I just want to make the point, if it's a very wide disparity, we know, and more than likely suburban parents will not move their kids in the 10th grade and the 11th grade. So therefore, if it's school by school encompassing all the grades, we're going to have to attempt to get the 9th grade class more from the suburban areas and from the Caucasian areas to meet those parameters.
Yeah, I'm looking for the document so I can give you the exact percentage. Biotech High School was at 23.7. Aerospace was at 18.6.
Ooh. So let's take aerospace. 18.6 from 25 is about 7% or so. So in order to become in compliance, we would have to increase that 7%. Would have to more than likely have to be the incoming freshman class cohort would have to be 7% more from the suburbs than normally, correct?
Yes, usually 9 and 10.
So see, I don't like this whole. That's okay. Anyway, Ms. Baptiste Perez.
You kind of hit on my question. I assume part of this is from what I had read in the newspaper of like the other districts not wanting to pay in part of the costs for the magnet school. But, and if I'm recalling correctly, we have not been invited to recruit at some of the affairs in the suburban districts. I'm not sure if you're necessarily the right person, Ms. Siegel, but have we tried outside means of marketing for our schools, whether it's a billboard in some of those towns or something more youthful, like an ad during a YouTube video or something that would actually capture the youth to be interested in our schools? And can we allocate funds towards marketing so we can actually catch up with those numbers?
Yes. Well, I know that the superintendent and the deputy superintendent have been working closely with the Fairchild Wheeler campus principals in order to develop plans for revitalization of the campus. And those plans include vigorous recruitment campaigns. And I believe they are building upon the effort initiated by the former superintendent with an outside public relations firm to develop professional recruitment material. So I don't have all of the details. I just wanted to report on the factors that have confronted us in the current year and indicate once again that looking ahead, particularly as we look to 24-25 after the ESSA grants end, that it's critical that we work towards not losing money in areas that are under our control. And those areas include pre-kindergarten, which I've mentioned, and we have been successful with the pre-kindergarten effort. And the other area is the Fairchild Wheeler high schools.
I have one more question. If we weren't granted the waiver for not reaching the residency standard, how much would it have been?
We would lose $3,300. I'm going to give you the number in a minute. Moment. About $65,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, so basically, we would be charged for the difference between 25% and 18.6% for aerospace. The number that I just shared with you pertained only to aerospace. So it's the difference between 25% and the residency standard of 18.6 times the population. Because basically, the state of Connecticut would be indicating that we're not going to fund you for Bridgeport students who filled the gap.
And while we're still in this vein, I don't know if you remember this, Ms. Siegel, but as part of the settlements, we were supposed to be able to recruit on their campuses again because they were keeping us off their campuses. Do you recall that, Ms. Siegel, or you just paying attention to the money?
I don't have specific information relevant to the recruitment effort in the suburban districts. That would be a question for the superintendent or deputy superintendent.
Okay, I'll follow up with them. Thank you. And I got a final question. In this presentation, I noticed there's something missing. I very seriously doubt it's your fault, but back in what was it, May. Back in May, there was some back and forth about giving us $2.5 million, and it fell through due to some political shift. And Mayor Ganem came out on May 17th in the newspaper, and he assured us that he would put that $500,000 back into our budget. Has he kept his word as reported in the Connecticut Post on May 17th, 2022?
We have not received any additional funding from the city.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Well, thank you very much, and I believe that's the end. Ms. Siegel, thorough as always.
Ms. Brown, got a question.
Ms. Brown, you got a question? I'm sorry. No.
I'm good.
All right. So I believe that's all. Thank you, Ms. Siegel, and thanks to the team on the line as well. As I said before, let's look for additional audit and any reflection on your work. Full faith and confidence. You're very professional, always very thorough in your advocacy. So I would like everybody to have a good night. And now I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And I shall second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a great night, everybody.
God bless
Thank
you all.
you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good night.